guest shadow infrastructure portfolio. I'm talking about Anthony Albanese. He joins us live from the nation's capital. Thanks so much for your company.
G'day, Peter.
Now, I understand, we might just show the image of it, that you tweeted a picture of yourself in a rainbow flag T-shirt holding a poodle. Is that yours?
That is mine. It's her name's Toto, so she likes rainbows, as in if fans out there of Wizard of Oz will recognise where her name derives from.
Even though you're an inner city MP, Mr Albanese, I never saw you as a poodle owner.
Well, she's a cavoodle and she's a lovely dog. And I think when you live in a heavily urbanised community, you should get an appropriate dog that doesn't require a huge amount of open space.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's get into some of the issues of the day.
She's a valued member of our family.
Well, yeah, no, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. And good for people who are allergic to dogs too, if it's a cavoodle. But look, we move on. We move on. Some of the big issues of the day, obviously, these budget results, Anthony Albanese. The government's got a right to crow about this, don't they? I mean, at the end of the day, they said the budget would be one thing, and it's come in with the actuals, $4.4 billion better.
Well, this, of course, has come in at 3 times the figure that Joe Hockey predicted in the first coalition budget in 2014. We've also seen the debt increase by some $147 billion on this government's watch. And in my area of infrastructure, it's a disaster. You've had over the government's first 3 years $3.9 billion of underspend on what it itself said it would commit to over the following 12 months. So areas like the Black Spots program, they said there'd be $220 million. The actual spend is $105 million. The Heavy Vehicle Safety program, $171 million in the budget, but only $51 million spent. The most remarkable program of all, I think, is the program for improving cattle supply chains, where you have National Party ministers who bung on about the importance of the cattle industry. Well, they had $35 million allocated over their first 3 budgets for this program. In May, at the time of the budget, they said they'd spend $1.2 million of that. That's now disappeared completely, not a dollar out the door. So they've actually got a program which for 3 years they haven't spent a dollar on. And that, of course, means that there has been less expenditure. And the problem with less expenditure on infrastructure is that it means less growth and less revenue coming into government in the future. It's bad economic policy to cut infrastructure investment, and that's exactly what this government has done.
Can I move on to another issue, Mr Albanese, and get your response to what looks like a little bit of ambiguity from Labor about its renewable energy target at around 45 or 50%. Is that a firm target that you plan to hit, or is that an aspirational target that you may or may not get to?
Oh, look, I reckon what will happen, Peter, is what's happened even with the renewable energy target that we had of 20% by 2020, which has been will be exceeded in spite of the best efforts of the coalition government to destroy the renewable energy industry. I mean, you have this this debate as if are renewables good or bad? Well, renewables are happening. I went with Bob Catter up to Hewenden and Kidston in northwest Queensland. The Kidston Stage 1, 537,000 solar panels connected up with storage through using the old gold mines to essentially create a hydro system to back that up, to make sure that it can then go into the grid and supply energy in a reliable way. Those 2 projects between them will power 1 million homes. We're seeing massive investment, and all that we need is some certainty. And I don't, for the life of me, understand why this government can't get on with the business of adopting the Finkel plan. They themselves created the Finkel review, and now they're mucking around over whether they'll implement it or not.
But Labor has a 50% renewable energy target and a 45% emissions reduction target. Now, there's enough question marks about the first of these two targets. The second one, Bill Shorten, he sounds like he doesn't believe that that's going to be achievable.
Well, the fact is that what we've got, if we have a whole of government approach, if we give support to the transition, that is happening in our economy, if we work on energy efficiency. The fact is that one of the things that defines, I think, my contribution to politics is I try to be positive. And I think that human ingenuity and use of new technology is showing that things can be delivered. The fact is now renewables are the cheapest form of new energy that's being developed out there. Now, 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. More and more, what we see is that new products on the market, including the use of battery storage and hydro to make sure that you have that reliability into the system.
I appreciate all of that, but and look, and obviously the use of renewables is vital to the driving down of the emissions, and therefore hitting your emissions reduction target of 45%. But do you really think you're going to hit it, or are you guys going to have to let that go?
No, well, we have these plans and we want to get into government so we can set about doing it. But the fact is, even this government has managed to hit the Kyoto targets, which, remember, under John Howard, who refused to ratify the Kyoto Protocol for all those years, I had private members' bills in the Parliament saying we should get on with the business of joining the world in ratifying Kyoto, and we've done it. In spite of the fact it took the Labor government to be elected in 2007. We'll be commemorating 10 years since that event pretty soon. The first act of the Labor government was to ratify the Kyoto Protocol, and that is what set Australia on the road to being a part of the global community when it came to acting on climate change. This government has sort of got a foot in and a foot out. You know, Tony Abbott talks about renewables, but it's actually his renewable energy target. They talk about the danger of the Paris Accord now, some of Tony Abbott's friends on the backbench as well as himself, but the government signed up to it.
But in fairness to Tony Abbott, he inherited a higher renewable energy target than what he ultimately then supported. He would have liked to have brought it down lower,
and now
but he had no chance.
He doesn't support the one that he did support.
Yeah, but he had no...
and now he doesn't support the one...
All right.
He doesn't support the one that is his target.
That is true.
This is a very confused man.
But his issue is the Senate, right? Like, he would like it to have been brought down more. They had to be realistic about what they could get through the Senate. It was Labor that put the renewable energy target in place. He then brought it down. They would have liked to go further, but the reality of the Senate is what it is.
Tony Abbott now is just playing politics. No matter what Malcolm Turnbull says, you can guarantee that Tony Abbott's against it. And there's no doubt that Tony Abbott is a very effective opposition politician, whether it be opposition to the former Labor government, whether it be opposition to Malcolm Turnbull. But that doesn't get anything done. That doesn't serve the nation. And the problem isn't that Tony Abbott's stuck in the past. It's that he wants the whole of Australia, led by Malcolm Turnbull, to go back there to keep him company. And Malcolm Turnbull seems incapable of saying, no, I'm not going to return to the past. I'm going to embrace the future. And that's why we have so many policies of Malcolm Turnbull, including his reluctance to really get out there and support what is the government's own strategy of a voluntary postal survey on marriage equality, even though Malcolm is certainly supports marriage equality. He isn't going too hard campaigning in favour of it. And why on renewable energy and climate change, you have some quite bizarre propositions at the moment that the government will have publicly funded and subsidised new coal-fired plants that might get going sometime in the decade after next. I mean, it's quite extraordinary when we have practical measures that can be taken consistent with the Finkel report.
Anthony Albanese, I know you're busy down in Canberra for the day. Thanks very much for joining us, finding the time for us here on Newsday. Cheers.
Good to be with you, Peter.